My name is Lily, and I'm 32 years old. If you had walked into our house that Tuesday evening, you would have seen me, screwdriver in hand, assembling furniture in the living room. I'd been spending the afternoon working on new shelves for our space, hoping to create something warmer, something more us. The soft buzz of the drill was the soundtrack of the moment. But then Ethan walked in, his footsteps heavy, his expression colder than usual. He stood in the doorway for a second, watching me. "Lily," he said, his voice strangely calm, "I think it's time we end things." I stopped in my tracks, my hand frozen midair. The screwdriver slipped from my grip and hit the floor with a dull thud. My mind didn't immediately register his words. It was as though the world had slowed down. He wasn't the kind of person who did things like this, especially not so bluntly. Ethan, my steady, reliable Ethan, was the one who always sought resolution, who prided himself on being practical and even-keeled. But this? The words hit me like the physical blow. "I think you and I both know it's not working anymore," he continued, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, still standing there, almost like he was rehearsing this moment in his head. "I want a future that's bigger, more exciting. You've got so much to offer, Lily, but the truth is, I've outgrown you. I can't be with someone who's stuck in the past." I felt my chest tighten, my pulse quicken, but I stayed silent. His words were sharp, cruel, but I didn't let him see the hurt that rushed through me. Ethan and I had been together for almost 7 years, long enough for me to know that these words weren't just coming from a moment of impulse. No, this was a culmination of something much deeper. The frustration had been building for months, but I had been too afraid to confront it. Too afraid to see the way he was slowly drifting away, not just from me, but from everything that had once felt like home. I'd noticed the subtle changes, his discontent when we'd talk about our future, his growing interest in his ambitious friends, and the way he would brush off my attempts to plan anything meaningful, like vacations, or even simple weekend getaways. I could feel his eyes wander, not just in the literal sense, but emotionally, mentally. He'd been checking out long before today. "I've been talking to Mia and Sophie," he continued, almost as if we were still having the same kind of conversation we used to have. "They've opened my eyes. I deserve more than this, than us. I want to be someone who is going places, Lily, not stuck in a life that's safe and predictable. I need someone who matches my ambition." His words, even as they were forming in my mind, twisted into something unbearable, safe, predictable. He used them like they were some kind of curse. I nodded, as if I understood, as if his words didn't feel like a slap to my chest. "I understand," I said, my voice shockingly calm, betraying no trace of the whirlwind of emotions inside. "I'll handle everything. You can take your time to get your things together." He didn't seem to notice the hint of something deeper in my voice, the unspoken understanding that I wasn't going to fight him, wasn't going to beg him to stay. "I'll need a few months to get things situated," he said, looking relieved, as if he had made a grand decision. "You should probably start thinking about where you'll go too. But don't stress about it," he added, with a small, almost smug smile. "You've got time. I want us both to move on, to be free." His words felt like they had been rehearsed in front of a mirror, like he had been convincing himself of this narrative long before he ever said it aloud. He had already written his future without me in it, and he was certain it would be better. I didn't react, didn't raise my voice, didn't shout. I simply let him continue as I felt a numbness begin to settle over me. After all, I wasn't surprised. Deep down, I had seen it coming. But here's the twist. Ethan thought he was making a clean break. He thought he was stepping into a new chapter, unburdened by the past. What he didn't know, what he couldn't see, was that the very thing he thought he was leaving behind, everything I had built for us, wasn't just going to disappear when he walked out the door. I had already made plans, long before he had the courage to voice his decision. I wasn't surprised because for months I'd watched him change. I'd seen the way he would light up when he talked about his friends' extravagant lives, their endless potential. I saw the look in his eyes when he'd speak about his career, about Mia's career, and his own future. I saw the way he'd glance at me, not as his partner, but as someone who was no longer enough. And that's the thing about people who are busy looking for something better. They often forget to see what they already have until it's gone. As he left the room to call his mother about the breakup, I stayed behind. My mind raced, but I knew exactly what I had to do. I just had to wait for the right moment. I had my own plans for this house, and they didn't include him. The days following Ethan's departure from our relationship were a strange mixture of numbness and purpose. I kept myself busy, quiet, calculating, moving my belongings to storage during lunch breaks, arranging the few things I could afford to part with, while he embraced the idea of a fresh start. He didn't know it, but I was the one already planning mine. I watched from the shadows as he moved in with Mia more frequently, and the house, once shared, began to morph into something else entirely. His presence was still there, but it was fading fast, replaced by her. She wasn't just visiting anymore. She had made herself at home, even taking liberties with the decor. The living room was rearranged, the walls now painted a bright shade of white that clashed with the calm, warm tones we had both chosen. Ethan seemed to think that Mia's vision for the house was a step forward, that his life was finally opening up, that this was the path he had always wanted. I could almost hear him telling himself that he was free of me, that I had been nothing more than an obstacle in his quest for something bigger, something grander. As he paraded her around, showing her off to friends, I couldn't help but wonder how much he'd been pretending to love this life with me. How much of it had been the comfort of routine, a comfortable partnership that, on paper, was perfect but lacked the sparkle of ambition he now craved. The kitchen was alive with new energy every evening. Mia would come over, laughing too loudly, and they would sip wine, talk about their plans, their dreams, and, without fail, about how I had held him back. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. I couldn't help but overhear their conversations, more about their future than anything else. Mia, with her quiet yet unyielding enthusiasm, discussed redecorating every inch of the house, and Ethan chimed in, happily indulging her ideas. It seemed that Mia's artistic ambitions were far more thrilling than the steady life I had tried to build with him. I had become the invisible presence in my own home. But it was okay. I wasn't angry. Not yet. In the silence of my own space, I made phone calls. My lawyer, Patricia, had been a godsend. I had already scheduled an appointment with her the day after Ethan's confession, fully aware of how this was going to play out. Patricia was thorough, calm, and professional. Everything I wasn't supposed to be right now, but everything I had to be. It didn't take long to get the legal details sorted. Since Ethan and I hadn't signed anything formal regarding the house, and since he had never contributed a single dollar to the mortgage or utilities, there was a clear path forward for me. "You've been living together as partners," Patricia said over the phone, "but legally, this is your house, Lily. He has no claim to it. In fact, it's a good thing you're taking control now, before he gets any ideas about what's his or not." For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of power stir within me. Ethan had made the assumption that, once he left, the house was his to dispose of as he saw fit. Mia and their friends could keep talking about renovations and future plans, but the truth was, everything he had thought he owned was already slipping through his fingers. I decided to take the next step in silence. By the end of that week, I had found a couple who was desperate to find a place just like mine. Ava and Max, both hardworking, reliable, and eager to settle down in a cozy neighborhood like ours, had been looking for a home for months. After reviewing their references and credit, I knew they were perfect for the space. I signed a lease agreement with them for a 2-year contract. It wasn't a small decision, it was a calculated one. The rental income from the couple would cover my mortgage and property taxes, leaving me with a healthy cushion to move forward. And Ethan? He would have no idea what hit him. But for now, I remained quiet, careful to let him think that nothing was changing. He was still in the midst of his new life, still basking in the illusion of freedom, and I wasn't about to burst his bubble just yet. Every day, as he made plans with Mia and made comments about how his life was finally moving forward, I continued to gather the pieces of my own future. I wasn't in a rush. I didn't need to be. But there was one thing that I knew for certain. Once the truth came to light, everything would change. Ethan would realize, too late, that his new beginning wasn't going to include the things he thought he had left behind. And by the time he figured it out, it would be too late for him to turn back. The house, the life we had built, and everything he thought he could leave behind, it was all still mine. The weeks after the breakup blurred together as I navigated the final stretch of my quiet rebellion. Ethan was so wrapped up in his own narrative, so deeply invested in the idea that he had upgraded to a better life, that he failed to see the subtle changes around him. By the time the lease was signed and the moving date was set for Ava and Max, I could feel the final pieces of my plan falling into place. Each day I packed away a little more of my life into storage, making sure to leave behind only the things that truly mattered: the photos, the family heirlooms, the keepsakes that told the story of my past, my family. The physical space was becoming less and less mine, but emotionally I was building something new, something stronger. Ethan, meanwhile, had fully embraced his new life. The house had transformed into a strange, unrecognizable version of itself, like a shell of what it used to be. There was a palpable difference now when I entered a room. His presence, or rather, the absence of it, hung in the air like a thick fog. Mia had made herself a fixture in every corner, placing new furniture, rearranging things to suit her style, not even caring to ask if it was okay. The front door no longer opened to my life, but to theirs. I overheard a conversation one evening as I was sitting in the kitchen, silently going over the last few details of my move. Ethan was on the phone with Sophie, laughing about the renovations Mia had started in the house, how they were finally getting things right. "It's funny," he said, his voice so light and carefree. "I never realized how much I was settling before. It's like everything was on pause, you know? Now it feels like we're finally living. Like we're not wasting time anymore." I wanted to shout to tell him that it wasn't his life that was paused, but mine, our lives together. But I didn't. I stayed still, letting the words roll off me as if they didn't matter. Because in a way, they didn't. I wasn't the one stuck, he was. I kept telling myself that this was my moment, the moment where everything I'd been quietly planning would come to fruition. I had already found a small apartment downtown, far from the shadows of my past life with Ethan. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Mine to fill, mine to decorate, mine to shape however I chose. I signed the lease for a one-bedroom unit in a quiet building near the heart of the city, a place where I could breathe, where I could leave behind the clutter of my past and start something new. Something real. The day I moved in was one of the strangest I'd ever experienced. I was leaving the house, leaving Ethan, and yet there was a sense of peace that settled over me. The whole process had felt like a slow, deliberate burn, but now, as I stood in the empty apartment, the first taste of freedom was exhilarating. The apartment was small, yes, but it had character, a charm that mirrored my own. I imagined waking up every morning to the sunlight filtering through the windows, just like I used to dream about. The one bedroom wasn't a dream home, but it was the beginning of my new life. Meanwhile, back at the townhouse, Ethan and Mia were living in a dream of their own. They didn't realize that the ground beneath their feet was starting to shift. They thought they were the ones moving forward, building their future. What they didn't know was that I had already made sure that their so-called future was built on nothing more than illusion. A week later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, sipping coffee, watching the sun break through the blinds. My phone buzzed, and I picked it up without thinking. It was a message from Patricia, my lawyer. "Everything's in place," she wrote. "Ava and Max are set to move in next week. I've reviewed the lease agreement again. No issues. You're all set. Just make sure to have the final walkthrough with them when it's time. Let me know if anything comes up." I smiled to myself, the weight of it all finally lifting. The best part? Ethan had no idea what was coming. He was still living in his comfortable delusion. Mia was still decorating the house, still planning their future, still under the impression that everything was going to fall into place. But the truth was, it never would. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was moving forward, one step at a time, and the house, the life I had shared with him, was no longer part of my story. And Ethan? Well, he would learn soon enough that the world he had tried to build without me was going to collapse. Saturday morning dawned cool and quiet, sunlight spilling through the blinds in delicate strips. I stood in the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, letting the stillness wrap around me. It was the last calm moment before everything unraveled, before Ethan's illusion of control shattered. At exactly 8:45 a.m., I pulled into the driveway of the townhouse for the final time. My car was filled with the last of my belongings, plants, a box of books, and the framed photo of my dad that had always sat on the entry table. It felt strange to see the place that had once been home now looking like someone else's dream. Through the front window, I could see Ethan moving around the kitchen in that robe Mia had given him for his birthday. She was there too, leaning against the counter, swirling her coffee, smiling that polished influencer smile that never quite reached her eyes. They looked perfect from the outside, exactly the way he wanted people to see them. A man who had traded stability for excitement, predictability for passion. I almost pitied them. Almost. At 9 o'clock a.m. sharp, a moving truck turned onto our street. Behind it came a small sedan, and from it stepped Ava and Max, the young couple I'd leased the house to, both of them bright-eyed and hopeful. Patricia arrived shortly after, briefcase in hand, her professionalism a stark contrast to the chaos about to unfold. The moment the moving crew began unloading boxes, the front door swung open. Ethan appeared, confusion creasing his forehead. "Excuse me?" he said, stepping onto the porch. "Can I help you?" Ava smiled politely. "Hi, we're Ava and Max. We just signed the lease for this property. We're moving in today." Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry. There must be some mistake. This is my house." Patricia stepped forward then, composed as ever. "Good morning, Mr. Nguyen," she said smoothly. "Patricia Chen, legal representative for Ms. Lily Tran, the property owner. According to the lease agreement, Ava and Max are the new tenants as of today. You and Ms. Mia Lee will need to vacate the premises." For a long moment there was silence, then panic. Ethan's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions. Disbelief, confusion, anger. "This is ridiculous," he said, laughing nervously. "You can't just... This is my home. Lily and I..." He stopped, catching himself. "I've been living here." "As Ms. Tran's guest," Patricia clarified gently, pulling a folder from her briefcase. "You were never on the mortgage, never paid rent, and there's no legal tenancy in your name. I believe you referred to Ms. Tran as your ex in recent correspondence?" The color drained from his face. Mia, who had been watching from behind him, suddenly stepped forward. "Ethan, what's going on?" Her voice trembled. "What does she mean, tenant? You told me this house was yours." I stood beside my car, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. Ethan finally turned and saw me. The recognition hit him like a blow. His expression hardened, pride kicking in to mask the fear. "Lily," he said sharply, "what is this?" I tilted my head. "You told me I was out of the picture," I said, my voice steady. "So I stepped out. The house went with me." It was like the words knocked the air right out of him. He stood frozen, mouth slightly open, the weight of realization crashing down in slow motion. Mia looked between us, her face paling as the truth started to sink in. "Wait," she whispered. "You mean this isn't our house?" I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You blindsided me," he said through clenched teeth, trying to regain his footing. This is cruel, Lily. You didn't even give me a warning." I smiled faintly. "I didn't have to. You made your decision weeks ago. You wanted me gone, remember? I just made sure everything went the way you wanted." Patricia, ever efficient, began handing Ethan and Mia copies of the legal documents, explaining in calm, measured tones the process for vacating the property. The moving crew, uncertain but professional, kept unloading boxes. The sound of furniture scraping against the pavement filled the tense silence. Ethan tried to argue, of course. He raised his voice, tried to invoke logic, emotion, even nostalgia. But Patricia had an answer for everything, her tone unshakable. Every attempt he made only tightened the noose of legality around him. Mia, meanwhile, was unraveling. "You lied to me," she said to him, eyes brimming with tears. "You told me this was your house. You told me we were going to build something together here." He turned to her, desperation flickering in his voice. "Mia, But she didn't wait for the explanation. She just shook her head, grabbed her purse, and walked down the steps past me, muttering something under her breath about men who play house with borrowed dreams. By 2 p.m, Ethan was gone, his car stuffed with whatever he could fit, the rest left in a disordered pile by the curb. Patricia made sure every document was signed, every key turned over. When it was done, Ava and Max thanked me warmly, their excitement infectious as they began moving into their new home. As for Ethan, before he left, he paused by my car, his eyes were red, his voice low. "I can't believe you'd do this to me," he said. "After everything." I looked at him, feeling an odd mixture of sadness and peace. "You told me I wasn't enough," I said quietly. "I just gave you the chance to find what you think you deserve." He didn't reply. He just got in his car and drove away, shrinking in the rearview mirror until he was gone. For the first time in months, the house felt calm again. Silent, steady, mine. Only I didn't need it anymore. I closed the gate behind me and drove back to my apartment, the sunlight catching the edge of the windshield like a quiet blessing. It's funny how quickly life can feel different when you stop trying to hold on to something that was never really yours to begin with. I spent the first few days in my new apartment simply absorbing the change. The place was small, yes, but it was clean, fresh, and mine. I didn't need a mansion to feel fulfilled, and the truth was that I had spent years building a life that wasn't even close to what I truly wanted. Ethan had been right about one thing. Our life together had become stagnant. But what he hadn't realized, what he couldn't see, was that I had been quietly evolving all along. And now I was finally stepping into the person I was meant to be. I rearranged the furniture just the way I wanted it. Everything simple and neat. The scent of fresh flowers filled the air, and for the first time in ages, the space felt like it was meant for me and no one else. I stood by the window one evening, watching the golden light of the sunset paint the skyline in soft hues of pink and orange. It was an entirely new chapter, and I felt the weight of the past lifting with every passing day. There were moments, of course, when I thought about what Ethan was doing, whether he was regretting his choices, whether he missed me. But those thoughts came less and less as time went on. I realized something that should have been obvious to me years ago. I wasn't waiting for his approval anymore. I wasn't waiting to be enough for him. I had already become enough for myself. I got a text from Patricia a few days later. I spoke with Michael and Jenna, she wrote. They're settled in, and everything is running smoothly with the lease. I'm glad to hear that you're finally at peace. I smiled as I read it, then took a moment to look out the window again. Michael and Jenna were great tenants. They were everything I had hoped for, respectful, responsible, and most importantly, they were creating their own home in the space that had once been filled with my hopes and disappointments. It felt good to know that the house was now in better hands, and that it was still standing as a place of new beginnings. As I settled into my routine, I realized that life had a way of offering small, unexpected blessings when you least expect them. I found joy in things I'd forgotten: reading on the couch, long walks in the park, cooking dinner without anyone else's opinions or distractions. My mornings were mine again, and I found myself taking better care of my body, my mind, my soul. I joined a yoga class downtown and began picking up hobbies I had put aside for years. A week later, I ran into Ethan, at a cafe, of all places. I hadn't expected to see him, certainly not so soon after everything that had happened. He was sitting at a corner table, staring down at his coffee. His appearance had changed, his clothes a little more wrinkled, his eyes a little darker, and there was something worn about his expression. He looked tired, not in the way that someone was working hard, but in the way someone looks when they've realized they made a choice that's harder to live with than they anticipated. He didn't notice me at first, so I took the opportunity to walk up and stand by his table. "Hey, Ethan," I said quietly. His head snapped up, and his face shifted through an array of emotions before settling on surprise, then quickly into a guarded expression. "Lily, I didn't expect to see you here." "I know," I said with a small smile. "It's kind of a surprise to me, too." He looked at me for a moment, as though searching for the words, but then his shoulders slumped slightly. I didn't want it to end like this," he muttered. "I thought I could make things better with Mia. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I don't know. I guess I was wrong." I didn't say anything at first. What was there to say? I wasn't interested in making him feel better. I didn't need him to apologize, but the truth was, there was a quiet satisfaction in seeing him so vulnerable. This was the reality of his choices, and it wasn't my burden to carry anymore. "I think you just wanted something different, something you thought you deserved," I said after a moment. "But sometimes what we want isn't what we need, and it takes time to figure that out. It's okay that you don't have it all figured out right now. I did what I needed to do for me. Now you need to figure out what's best for you." He nodded slowly, as though the words hit him harder than he expected. "Yeah," he said softly. "I guess I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." I took a breath, knowing this conversation was going nowhere. I didn't need closure from him anymore. I had found mine. "Well," I said, standing up, "I hope you figure it out. I really do." And with that, I walked away. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about showing him he was wrong. It was about giving myself the space to move on, to become the person I was always meant to be. I didn't need his approval or regret to validate my journey. The truth was, I had everything I needed right here, right now, and I was moving forward no matter what. The next day, I received a small note from Ethan in the mail. It was a simple apology, written in a hurried, almost embarrassed scrawl. I didn't know what I had until I lost it. I was wrong. I hope you're doing well. I think you were always more than enough for me, Lily. I folded the note and set it aside. It wasn't the grand gesture I might have once hoped for. It was just a letter, something that told me I had truly moved on, and that was enough.